I'm a 911 operator. Earlier this night, I got a call from myself.
DisastrousInvolvedI.
History 1.
I'm not sure how smart giving out personal information is after something I thought could only happen in movies actually happened, but I'm scared about what this all could mean, and I want people to hear and know about this if something happens to me. I assure you, I am no on medication, suffer from no mental illnesses, and have no trauma of any kind and anything else you might think of. I am a completely average person living a completely average life. Well, I guess, up until now. My name is Marielle. I'm from a small town in Georgia where everyone knows each other, and I work as a 911 operator. My family lives in a rural town out of state, and I haven't spoken to them about this yet out of fear that whatever's going on might somehow affect them too if I get them involved. Yesterday I began my night shift the same way I do every evening. Most of the time I get low priority calls, and a few times pranks, and since I've been doing this for a few years now, I've grown quite good at discerning what's an actually concerning call. The shift was rather tame, up until I got what I thought was a prank call. 911, what's your emergency? I spoke into the phone after returning my cup of coffee back on the desk and readjusting myself. Someone's outside my house. They've been looking around my yard and windows for the past 2 minutes. It was a woman on the other end, her voice familiar ever since the first few words, but I couldn't quite place it yet. She spoke very fast. It was obvious how nervous she was about this. No surprise there, I would be too. I thought it was some friend, but I don't know this person and they look off. Okay, ma'am. Nudging my chair closer to the desk as I begin typing on the computer, I asked the lady another question in the meantime. Can you give me your address and tell me if you can see if this person is armed? Yeah, I'm the yellow house at. The woman continued, but I admit, I didn't listen. She had just given my house address. I stopped my fingers in the middle of writing and sighed, thinking this must be one of my friends. We're a small bunch and very mischievous towards each other. Sort of out of character for our age, I must admit, but I've said numerous times how serious prank calling 911 can be for people. Who is this? You know how badly this can end for you, right? I reached for my coffee cup, rolling my eyes, and held my hand ready to hang up the call, but she continued, What? I don't get it, I'm serious. Please don't hang up. She retorted in a tone that caught me off guard, and then again after a second she returned to the previous, somewhat panicked attitude. I'm sorry, but this isn't a joke, please, I'm afraid of what this person might do. Okay, ma'am. I put the cup back on the desk and was ready to prolong this call to enough of an extent to make this woman face the consequences for holding the line. What bad luck for her, I thought, to get the operator living at the exact house she decided would be her target. What's your name and which room are you in right now? I'm Marielle. I'm looking out my bedroom window right now. They're still there. My blood started to boil. How senseless this person must be. It was obviously a friend. I raised my voice this time, warning them again about how badly they will regret their actions if they prank call again, and just as I was about to hang up, Marielle started to beg me frantically not to. For whatever reason, something inside me was telling me to listen. I decided to give her one more chance, and then I would send the police over to arrest this prank caller and at the very least give her a slap on the wrist. Okay, Marielle. Describe the bedroom to me. What? You heard me. What color are the curtains? Is there any furniture? Lamps? Tell me what you can see. Though I've known said friends for quite a while now, none of them have ever been in my house. I prefer it that way, not because I don't trust them to enter my home, but because I've never been fond of having guests. Neither did my parents when I was little. It's something they had that has transferred over to me. There's no way this person would. Purple curtains, double bed with a grayish cover with white lines, a wardrobe and a small bedside table with a night lamp on it. She went on for a few seconds while I listened, completely dumbfounded. She was describing exactly how my bedroom looked. Her next words snapped me out of the confusion. Miss, why you asking me this? There's someone outside my house. I couldn't answer her immediately. This was just so surreal, nothing like anything I'd experienced so far in this job. This woman, apparently named Marielle, who sounds just like me, claiming she lives at my address, and is standing in the exact same bedroom as mine, was talking to me. Marielle. How did any of this make sense? I tried to keep my cool and continue talking to her normally, but I could hear the shakiness in my own voice when all I could mutter was an "okay, ma'am," before falling silent again and rummaged around my desk drawer to find my personal phone. My ex-husband had installed security cameras facing the front, back and sides of our house at different angles after some people started talking about the same car driving around their homes multiple times during the day and night, but nothing ever came out of it. It didn't hurt to have the extra security measure, but I never thought I'd actually have to use it. I opened the app while this Marielle kept repeating hello, but I was too preoccupied to answer. I admit my heart had dropped into my stomach at this point, and it only got worse after I opened the camera app. My bedroom window looked out of one of the sides of my house, and right beyond the wooden fence was someone pacing left and right while looking up at the house. I finally snapped back, "Okay, Marielle, okay? I'm sending a patrol car your way immediately. Excuse the holdup." I tried to regain my composure but could still hear my words trembling as I spoke them out loud. While the person wasn't trespassing and technically not committing any crime, what puzzled me more was that I was currently, completely free of any alcohol or drug influence, talking to myself. To another me. Move away from the window to make sure he doesn't see you. I paused for a moment, taking in how ridiculous the whole situation was again, and finished my question, listening intently for the answer that was about to come from the other Marielle, not sure what I was expecting to hear. "Do you have a weapon in your house you could use in case his intentions become malevolent? I mean, the only thing I can think of right now are the knives in the kitchen, and there's an old pistol, but it's in the basement and the door to it is outside. Am I going to have to defend myself?" She sounded stressed out as she asked, but I was more shocked to hear the same exact words I'd have said in response to this question. "I have a pistol, and it's in the basement, the door to which is outside." Still unable to comprehend all of this, I told Marielle, or me I guess, to check again and see where the person is, and reassured her that the patrol car is only a few minutes away from the house. Only now did I finally look around, thinking that I must be dreaming, and caught the gaze of a fellow co-worker who had his eyebrow raised. He must have been listening in to my conversation and seen me acting off, but I tried to smile to the best of my ability and nod, quickly returning my focus to my screen before I could see his reaction. "Marielle? Do you see them still?" I inquired, but got no response for another few moments. She then stumbled on her words, and I could hear the door creaking open just as my bedroom door did, and her footsteps rapidly moving from room to room, presumably looking out other windows. No, he's not out there now. I don't know where he is. Oh God, did I miss him? Is he coming towards my house?" She sounded like she was on the verge of a panic attack. I did my best trying to calm her down while searching for the person myself, switching between different cameras, and when I found him I saw him in the backyard with an arm raised in the middle of the air. Moments later, a rock flew towards my kitchen window, and though the cameras have no audio to them, Marielle's shriek was perfectly timed in sync with the impact. Holy shit! He just broke one of my windows." She yelled frantically and began raving inaudibly into the phone. Marielle, get to your attic. Quickly. The police will be at your place soon. Use anything you find up there to block the way in." I yelled back, raising my voice loud enough to overshadow hers and to probably scare my coworkers with the sudden decibel increase. Whatever was happening, it was real. There was someone outside my house who had just broken a window when I was in there, afraid for my life. The advice I gave her was exactly what I would have done. The attic hatches in the middle of the hallway leading from the living room to my bedroom, giving her enough time to get up there and block it afterwards, considering this person had to pass through the kitchen and then through the aforementioned parts of the house. By my calculations, Marielle had enough time to get there and use all the pent-up trash and whatever else she could find to hold the hatch shut for the little time left the police needed to arrive. I could hear Marielle slam the door behind her and run down the laminated hallway towards the hatch, and then I gasped audibly as she yelled into the speaker and the phone dropped with a loud thud, her footsteps becoming more and more distant as another, heavier set made their way faster and faster through the hallway and closer to the phone. "Are you still there? The police are almost at your location," was all I could think to say in my last effort to scare whoever this person was away. A few seconds of silence and I expected to hear something, anything, some scary, cryptid remark or at least breathing, but there was nothing. My last word into the receiver was an empty hello before the other end hung up. I couldn't believe what had just happened, and must have sat at my desk staring into the screen for at least 2 minutes before the same coworker from earlier, Connor, came and put his hand on my shoulder, prompting me to scream and push him away. The entire office looked our way and he put his hands up in the air. I apologized profusely more times than I could count. Everyone turned back to their desks and Connor lowered his hands. Tough call? He asked and leaned on my desk, handing me a chocolate bar. You seemed really on edge the entire time and, well, this just confirms it. I didn't even acknowledge the snack after I looked at it and just met his eyes again, not knowing what to say. I began with a few disconnected words before excusing myself and leaving the shift early. It's a little after 2:30 as I finish writing this. I booked myself a room into the most crowded hotel I could find with the room closest to the stairs leading to the reception, shutting the blinds and locking the door twice. I'm afraid to go home, and I don't know who to talk to about this without sounding completely insane. I've heard nothing from the responding police officers yet and I don't know what to do about this tomorrow. Anyone reading this, please believe me, and even if you don't, can you please offer me some advice?
History 2.
I'll never forget that stare. I would like to make something very clear here. I usually never get scared. When I say never, I truly mean never. I'm a huge fan of horror, but I never felt fear from anything in my life. Mild discomfort at most, but even that's rare. That is until what I experienced 5 minutes ago. It's 5:15 a.m. and I never felt such fear before. For context, I live with my grandma. She just turned 82 last week and I took time off work to visit and spent time with her in Virginia. I'm 25 and work as a financial analyst in New York. She's raised me all my life and we're extremely close, genuinely the sweetest woman I know. However, the incident I just experienced makes me uncomfortable. Yesterday, we were watching TV in the living room and she was getting a little tired. My grandma is an early bird, so she usually goes to bed at 8:30 to 9 p.m. every night. Tonight was no different. As she got up from the chair she's had since I could remember, she hugged me goodnight and headed upstairs to her bedroom. I'm a night owl and usually don't go to bed until 4:30 to 5 a.m. lol, so I chose to stay up a bit longer. A few hours passed and I was still watching TV. However, I started hearing a faint banging sound from afar. I couldn't wrap my finger around it, but I ignored it at first. My grandma lives in the middle of the forest in a cabin, so I assumed it was an animal outside scraping for food or something. 5 minutes later and the banging got a bit louder. The weird thing is that the bangs were consistent. If that makes any sense. I'd where it was coming from, but it certainly came from outside the house. I started getting a bit concerned when it wasn't stopping, so I went upstairs to check on Grandma. Thankfully, she was fast asleep, and all the windows were locked. By the time I made it to her bedroom, the banging had stopped, so I let it be and walked back down. It was 2 a.m. by this point and I figured it was time to at least try to go to sleep, since I have insomnia, so I got ready and headed to the guest bedroom, which is where I slept. What felt like a few hours passed, and the banging came back. I hadn't fallen asleep yet, so I could vividly hear the moment it returned. However, this time, it was a little stranger. Not only was it much louder, but also, it wasn't just a banging sound, I could also hear screaming coming behind it. A what seemed to be blood-curdling scream of a person yelling for help. The longer I waited, the louder it got. Eventually I got pissed off and got out of bed. With my phone flashlight at hand, I followed where the bangs and screaming were coming from. But suddenly, just as I had made it to the living room, it had stopped. TJ, are you okay? I heard. I turned around and saw my grandma standing on the other side of the hallway. Yeah, just that I heard a lot of banging and screaming from outside. I replied, banging and screaming. Grandma seemed confused. Yeah, but maybe it was just an animal or something. I said while dimming the phone flashlight. Although I didn't believe for a second that it was just an animal, I didn't want to make my grandma worried or cause any problems for the night. Besides, it had already stopped, so I hoped that it wouldn't come back. Grandma sighed. Things like that happen around here sometimes. You should get some sleep, sweetie. It's late and we have plans tomorrow. I smiled. Yes, Grandma, I will. Love you. I hugged her and went back to my room where I eventually dozed off. I could hear my grandma turning on the TV and cooking herself breakfast. As usual, the next day passed by in a flash and nighttime came by again. I hadn't thought of what happened the night before and just saw it as a normal day. That is until I realized that it was 1 a.m. and my grandma was still wide awake. Not just that, but also a lot more talkative than usual too. This wouldn't have caught me off guard if it weren't for the fact that she never stayed up past 9 p.m. for the last 20 years. "Hey, Grandma," I asked. "Shouldn't you go to bed? It's late for you." "Oh sweetie, but I'm not tired," she said. "I'll go in a bit, don't worry." It was starting to get late, even for my standards. "You should go to bed soon, it's getting late." "I'll go now, good night," I said. As I laid down on my bed, I closed my eyes. After what felt like 15 minutes, I heard that faint sound again. Banging. As it got louder, the blood-curdling scream followed. "What the fuck?" I muttered under my breath as I swiftly pushed the duvet off me. Grabbing my flashlight, I went back to investigate. This time, with the intention of figuring out what it was. As I slowly opened the door, I tiptoed around the house, following the sound. It seemed like my grandma was back upstairs, sleeping, so I tried to be as quiet as possible, even though banging and screaming wasn't helping. Although I didn't feel scared of what was happening, like I said, I don't get scared easily, I was getting a bit uncomfortable as the sound worsened the closer I got to it. "What the fuck?" I muttered again. As I walked closer, the banging and screaming got progressively louder. Suddenly, I paused. There was no mistaking it, the banging and screaming was coming from the other side of the storage room door, the room my grandma keeps her stuff in. As I reached out to it, I felt a cold presence send shivers down my spine. I gasped and staggered backwards. As I quickly turned around, I saw my grandma standing at the other side of the hallway. But this time, she looked different, her back, completely straight. Her skin was pale. Her soulless, lifeless stare piercing through me. It was the first time I had seen a human without a single sign of a catch light shining her eyes. It was a tense and deadly, but lifeless expression, one I can't describe in words. However, it was the first time I felt danger looking at the lady who had raised me for 25 years. Her face was glowing from the moonlight outside, although the rest of her body was surrounded by darkness. From afar, it looked like a floating head. Suddenly, her eyes widened, and there followed a smile. However, not a single wrinkle formed around her eyes. It was ominous. Nothing could convince me that the person standing in front of me was my grandmother. "It barely felt human, TJ," she said, her voice toned flat. "What are you doing?" I began shaking. By this point, the screaming had stopped. It was silent. I began stuttering, then stayed quiet. No word escaped from my lips. For the first time in my life, I felt genuine fear. "TJ," repeated my grandma, her voice toned still flat. My body tensed up as I looked at her. I could barely breathe. "What are you doing?" said my grandma, slower than before. I took a deep breath, hoping that any ounce of my body could relax enough so I could form a sentence. "I'm sorry, Grandma," I said, my voice cracking. I was curious on what the screaming was. Grandma's smile dropped instantly, and her eyes widened further. "What scream?" My body tensed again. It felt like I was getting stares from all angles. I suddenly felt something cold touch my bare feet. As I looked down, I saw what looked like blood leaking from the storage room door, reaching to my feet. "Thomas Jr.," said my grandma, raising her voice slightly. I gulped and looked back up. "Yes." "What scream?" she repeated, her voice deepening slightly. Only one sentence could come out of me at that moment. "Maybe it was just a dream." "I'm sorry, Grandma." Her eyes widened further, although her stare only became more tense. "Go to sleep, now," she said, enunciating every word. She sounded deeper than before, almost inhumane. "Yes, Grandma," I said, my body tensing up further. As I walked towards her, a sense of pressure dawned over me. Walking past her, I could feel her stare stabbing my head. Walking to my room, I closed the door and hid under the covers. Checking my foot, my suspicions were correct. What I felt leaking from under the storage room door wasn't just water, it was cold blood. This event leads to me writing this down. What to do? My grandma's stare, if she even was my grandma at that moment, is implanted into my brain. I feel a cold presence looming over me. I'm still shaking, hoping that the morning comes ASAP and I can forget about this. What should I do? Please, I need all the help I can get. I don't know what to do.
History 3.
They want me dead, and I don't blame them. The knife came out of nowhere. 1 minute I was ordering a slice of cake from the waiter, the next there was a flash of silver. My brain registered that the waiter had whipped out a knife only after I had automatically recoiled from him, sliding further into the booth. Without conscious thought, I picked up and flicked the steaming cup of coffee at his face. The knife slashed past my face, missing my eye by a hair's breadth. I thought I saw an eyelash fall. The waiter screamed as the brown liquid plastered his face, and dropped the knife. I stared wildly around. There were only 2 other guests in the diner. They seemed rooted to their seats. A chef stood at the kitchen window. Frozen mid-plating, garnish still in hand. None of them seemed to be in any hurry to help. I was trapped in the booth by the window, and had the option of trying to climb over the high-backed seats to the booth behind, or to clamber over the table to make a leap to the next booth in front. The waiter stopped clawing at his face in those short seconds. He flailed his arms out at me as I sprung up onto the seats. He missed, and I yelped as I leapt onto the table, then attempted to springboard past him. Still half blinded, the waiter turned and grabbed something off the ground. The knife. Damn it. He swung back around, and I prepared myself to leap from his reach. A shot rang out. Accompanied by the shattering of glass, I ducked, falling to my knees. I swiveled my head, desperately trying to spot where the shot had come from. There was a thud by my side. The waiter had collapsed to the ground. The back of his head was a clumpy red and gray mess. An acrid, metallic scent, tinged with gunpowder, enveloped the place. Screams. It took me a while to realize I was a contributing instrument to the symphony of screams. The police arrived shortly after. They didn't know who had shot my assailant. I certainly didn't have a gun on me, and had 3 witnesses to vouch for my innocence. They assumed a passerby had intervened and run, for fear of repercussions for shooting a man dead. Justifiable or not. No one on the streets witnessed the shooting. Or so they said, when asked by the police. I think I puked at some point. I don't think I'll ever forget the way the gooey, lumpy substance had trickled out his head and down the sides of his body. The police had no idea why he had attacked me, what my would-be murderer's motivations were. They didn't even know who the waiter was. He had apparently appeared out of nowhere with a fake identity, and taken the job as waiter just a few days before I dropped in for my usual coffee and cake breakfast. I didn't leave my house for 2 days. When I finally did, it was for a crisis at work. Something I had to personally deal with. I was terrified the whole journey. Every little thing made me jump. I made sure to mind my own business, and kept my eyes averted from others. I was almost at the entrance to my office building when a car pulled up next to me. I was so relieved at finally reaching my destination, that I didn't notice the window in the passenger side wind down, didn't notice the gun pointed straight at me, didn't see the face of the person holding the gun. Not until another car rammed into the back of that car, and the shot went wide. As the bullet struck the concrete wall behind me, missing my head by a couple of inches, I stared straight at the shooter. Their face was covered by a mask, one of those cheap white masks with eye holes that you could buy at any party store. I saw them curse, then turn to aim the gun at me for another shot. Their head exploded. One moment I was looking into hard eyes gleaming through the white mask, next there was a headless neck perched on lifeless shoulders, blood splattered all over the dashboard and seats. The body slumped forward. I found myself joining in the cacophony of screaming, once again. Before I could recover my wits, someone grabbed me from behind, and a cloth was pressed over my mouth and nose. I struggled as they dragged me to the car, the one that had rammed into the first car and ended up saving my life. They hadn't even slammed the door shut after me when I passed out. I awoke to darkness. I was still in a state too groggy, too out of it to panic, when I heard a voice. The odd robotic timbre made it clear a modulator was being used. You need to stay here. It's to keep you safe. It's just for a short while. I didn't respond. My tongue felt swollen and dry, like a dust ball had enveloped it. We will not harm you. It's our duty to keep you safe. That was all that was said. I raised my head off the ground, and sat up. I was relieved to find that I wasn't bound or tied. Who the hell could have done this? They said they were keeping me safe, but they had basically kidnapped me. But who would kidnap me? Was it one of my recent one-night stands? Did I offend anyone on a date? Was it a bitter work colleague? An angry ex? I couldn't think of anyone I could possibly have offended enough to be kidnapped for. Or attacked at knife and gunpoint, for that matter. Minutes passed in the unlit room, then hours. The darkness was absolute, the silence unyielding, punctuated only by my panicked breaths. The air was stale, a mix of sweat, earth, and disinfectant. Respite from the isolation came only in brief interludes. Whenever I was fed, a little rectangle of light would appear at the door, followed by a tray of food slid through to me. I refused to eat food I could not see, and so they would turn on the lights for 5 minutes while I ate. There was a loo in the room, which I could freely use, though the darkness made it hard to navigate. I tried to go only when the light was still on. Besides the meals, nothing. At some point, at my desperate pleas, they said I would be released in a matter of days. But time in that dark room stretched endlessly. The wait between meals felt like forever. It's surprising how agonizingly slow time passes when you have nothing to engage your mind with. No phones, no books, no chatter, nothing. I began to suspect they were torturing me, in some sick psychological way. I began to wonder if that was it, for the rest of my life. Trapped in darkness. Alone. When nothing changed after the 9th meal, I counted, I ignored the 10th meal. I stayed unmoving, ignoring the lights and the tray that slid into the room. I didn't bother to slide the tray out when instructed to. By the 15th meal that I had ignored, I heard voices outside the door. I pretended to be fast asleep, and didn't stir. It was easy to lay still. I had barely moved since I started skipping meals. I was consumed by hunger and thirst. All I could think about was a tall glass of iced lemonade and eating peanut butter from the jar. "We need to let her go," I heard someone say. It wasn't in a modulated voice. It sounded like a woman. "She's not eating. She could die at this rate. She's been passed out for the last half a day. It's not safe yet." A man's voice responded. "We haven't caught all of them. It's one guy. One guy escaped. He's probably busy fleeing. And we've locked down their time door. You think there aren't others? For fuck's sake, she's the butcher's mother. There's gonna be others keen to end her." The exasperation was clear in the man's voice, "But we've stopped the only group with access to a time door," the woman snapped. "What do you need, to lock her up for years as we hunt down every single person who might try to take her out? We might as well end her ourselves." The woman snapped. "Would that be so bad? It would save hundreds of lives." The man asked. "Stop it. She's innocent. She's not her son. And it's our job to keep the timeline intact. We cannot let history change. You know what could happen." "She did produce a monster," the man retorted. Then he sighed. "I get it, okay. I know my duty. It's just that I see why they're trying." There was silence after that. I was left alone once again, except for the meals I ignored. I was finally certain. I had been kidnapped by a bunch of crazies. I had no son, and was a proud, card-carrying member of the child-free club. I ignored 3 more meals before I heard their voices once again. This time, through the modulator. I could barely focus through the fog of deprivation. "The door will be unlocked in 10 minutes. You will be free to leave then." I didn't speak. I didn't trust them. It could all be a cruel joke, to give me false hope. "Others will be coming for you," the voice spoke again. "You have to be very careful, take all precautions to stay safe." That was all. A while later, there was a click at the door. I struggled to my feet, and almost passed out when static encroached my vision. I pushed past the weakness and dizziness, and made my way to the door. To my immense relief, it opened when I twisted the knob. I won't bore you with details of how I made it home. But I made it home safe, and made a police report once I had choked down some food and water. No one tells you how much difficulty, how much stomach-twisting pain you would feel eating and drinking again after days of fasting. I sure as hell never tried to fast before, and never will again. The police were, once again, useless. I directed them to where I had been held, but they gleaned nothing from the room or the surrounding area. There was not a single evidence or clue to be found. They concluded that I had been kidnapped by a bunch of mentally unwell people, and that they were also behind the attacks. The officers told me they would be in touch once they had more to go on, and that my house would be under surveillance for my protection. I would also be escorted to work for the foreseeable future. I took a week off work, to recover from the whole ordeal. Or try to, at least. It was a mind screw, to say the least. I couldn't make sense of anything that had happened. Even in the safety of my home, I was drowning in fear. Every little sound made me start, and reach for my baseball bat. My period of starvation also made it hard for me to consume food and drinks again. I puked several times when I tried to eat, and it was hard for me to keep water down. It was only after a fourth morning of nausea when I called the officers parked in front of my house to escort me to the convenience store. I needed to be sure. Once I was alone in the house with my purchase, the officers back to surveillance duties. I peed on the stick I bought. The 3 minutes took forever to go by. There it was. A bold line, and a second faint line.